We're going to get things started right now with Sentry's integration platform. The fifth pillar of Sentry, again, we didn't do a dedicated section on Discover, but we've kind of gone from left to right here, wrapping the day up with ecosystem. Today's host is Meredith Heller. She's a software engineer at Sentry. Without further ado, I will pass it over to you, Meredith. Take it away.
Hello, so I'm going to share my screen. And let's see, share sound. Cool, so my name is Meredith. I'm an engineer on the ecosystem team, and we'll be going into a demo today of how to use the integration platform, or one way in which you could use the integration platform. But I do want to start off with kind of going over what ecosystem is at Sentry, like what is our main goal, and then dive into what is the integration platform, who is it for, and then from there we can go into the demo. So ecosystem covers a lot of things at Sentry. Our main goal, I would say, is to make sure that Sentry can integrate with anybody's preferred development workflow. So we can do that in kind of two ways. One way being we can build the integrations for people to use. And the other way would be we can build the tools and give people the resources to build those integrations themselves. So the first part of that is building those integrations for people. And there's some logos on this slide to kind of illustrate some of the integrations that we've already built. You may have seen them in some demos. You may already use some of these with your Sentry organization. And you can do a lot with these integrations. I tend to think of them as being under, I would say, three broad categories. One being project management, another being alerting and incident management. You could maybe split that up. And then also source code control, which is also kind of like a broad category, but usually people have at least one integration from each of these categories. And I mean, these categories could change over time. The more Sentry evolves as a product and the more other tools in the space evolve, I think there's more ways in which you could categorize how to integrate. But even with all the integrations that we've built ourselves, there are always going to be new tools to integrate with, new ways in which people want to use their tools with Sentry. And so I think the other way that ecosystem as a team can help with that is, building tools for other people to use so that they can actually customize and build integrations that they want. So that's kind of where the integration platform comes into play. Initially, it was built with the idea of, okay, let's make it easy for other companies and teams to build integrations that can be then used by other Sentry users. So for example, within our project management category, this is like taken from our marketing screenshot of the integrations we have in project management. Almost half of these integrations are built on the integration platform. So Clubhouse, ClickUp, Linear, Teamwork, these are all integrations that were built on this integration platform that if you use Sentry, you can now use these integrations, which is really cool. And I really like this slide partly because it shows that, with this platform, we've essentially doubled the amount of options people have. The other, I guess, part of the integration platform that kind of came, I guess, a little bit later was the concept of an internal integration. So the difference between what we call like a published integration versus a internal integration would be the intention of that integration itself. So if your intention is to build an application, an integration that's going to be used by other Sentry users, you're going to want to go down the route of having a public integration. But let's say you're just, either a single developer or you have a small team and you just really want to use this other tool that we don't support, but you want to use with Sentry, you could use an internal integration to kind of make that possible. And it would just be unique to your organization. So that's kind of like the demo we're going to go through today, is building an internal integration. To set the stage, I've built like a really simple like dummy Trello app. You can see here that we do have Trello as an option, but we're going to pretend here that it wasn't. So this may be the case of, or you could think of it as, okay, if there's like a project management tool that I want to use, but Sentry doesn't support, this is an example of how you could use the integration platform to actually make it so that you could integrate with that. So from there, I'm just going to, let's see, I guess I want to, I want to stop presenting this. Cool. Okay, so we're done with that. I'm going to go back into Sentry now. This is just an example project that I have. I guess I can just go into an issue here. People may already be familiar with this, but basically on the sidebar, so like this is an example of an issue details page in Sentry. On the sidebar, we have options to choose from. This is like a test account that I use. So there's a bunch of things I've integrated with, but we could look at like Bitbucket, for example. If I wanted to create a Bitbucket issue, I fill out all of these things, I click create issue, and then it would create an issue in Bitbucket. We essentially want to do the same thing, but for our own service, which in this case is going to be Trello. So to actually do that, I've written the code already, and I've also set up the integration. But to start that, I am just going to run the app and then start ngrok, because I'm going to use ngrok. So if I refresh, I should be able to see my app on the sidebar. Uh-oh. Oh, okay, hold on. Refresh. All right, here we go. So we have, it's now an option here, magically. I'll show you in a second how we get that to be there. But when I open it, we get a similar modal to the Bitbucket, but it's a little bare bones. We do have the title, we have a description field, it's not filled out, and we have this like list of boards here. We also have the link section, which I've actually hard coded in like one example. You probably wouldn't need to do that, but I just want to show you that you can actually hard code in the options that populate a select field. So I'm going to go now to developer settings, which is where you would go to actually create a internal integration. So I have a couple internal integrations already set up. If you wanted to create a new one, you could go here and create that. If you wanted to go the public route, it's going to be a similar look, but there's a couple more options. So, but this is the page to do that. So I'm going to go into our Future of Frontend demo. Okay, so we are in the internal integration details. If you missed where that was because it wasn't good resolution, this is under your developer settings in your organization settings. So here I have the schema. The schema is used for our UI components, and there's two types. There's the issue link, which is kind of the project management stuff I'm going to talk about. We also have a stack trace link, which I would just, if you want to learn more about that, you can read about that in our docs, but it's not as complicated, but they both would go in here. The formatting is not as nice as I'd like, but I'll try to highlight things so that it's maybe easier to see. So we have link, and I guess I'll highlight link and create, which are the two actions you can take for issues. We saw from the link that I had hard coded in that option. That's what I'm doing here. I'm basically giving a label card 1, and the value is like, imagine the card ID was 1. But you can also use a URI in your select field to actually get a list of boards. So that's actually, we'll look into how I'm doing that in a bit. But I also want to point out that for the title, we saw that we got that like pre-populated title, and we can actually do the same for the description as well. This is something we added because it is nice to have that information already pre-populated, and we also do that for our other integrations as well. So all I'm doing here is adding a default And I'm specifying issue description, saying I want the description of the issue to already be populated. So I'm going to save this change, and hopefully when I come back to here and I refresh, when I open this up, I have a description, and this looks much better. It's much nicer. So I guess next I want to talk about this, this board field here. So I have a bunch of boards here. If we want to take a look at Trello, so this is like the main board I'm going to be working with. I've just made 3 lists. These things in Trello are called lists, and each list can have a number of cards. Here's an example of a card. I do have other boards that are just, random things that I've used, but if you had an organization where you had multiple boards that you needed, you could, pick from whichever one you wanted. I just wanted to demonstrate that you can, have a list to choose from. So I'm going to click Sentry bugs because that's what we want to work with. And then I'm going to save this, and we can see that it's linked. So I'm actually going to take us now to the code. Actually, maybe I'll show you real quick that this link does in fact take me to Trello, and it did in fact create this. But I'm going to now go back, or I guess go to the code to kind of give you a little bit more information on what I'm actually doing. So the first part, I'm just going to expand this, was that boards endpoint that I specified. So basically what I've implemented is in my Flask app is this route boards. And I've made 2 clients in this, a Trello client and a Sentry client, because I'm making requests to both. That code's kind of hidden because it's a little messy, but trust me, it does get the boards that I want. And then it sets the label to be the name of the board and the value to be the ID of the board, so I know which board. And then this gets returned back to Sentry. So you need the options in the select fields to be in this format. The additional thing you could do with this is add a default. So if we go back to my linked issue here, maybe I can just remove that and open this up again. This is not pre-populated with anything, but if I had a default board, let's say my Sentry bugs board, I could have that like already populate when I open the form. So I'm just gonna make this again. And so we've kind of looked at how the boards work, but what about creating the actual ticket itself, or card, I guess. I'm gonna go back to our schema to kind of show you what's happening here. So this URI here is has to do with this particular field, this select field for the board. And that gets called when I'm actually opening the modal. I make a request, Sentry makes a request to my service. I say, here are all the boards, and then you can do what you want with that information. The user can then pick what they want. This URI here is telling me, okay, when I want to create this card in Trello, give me, like, send all the information to this endpoint. So basically what I'm going to get back is all of the fields that were in that form in the first place. So we can look at that route, which I have here. Hopefully this, maybe, I don't know. Hopefully this is, people can see. I don't know if that makes it a little bit better. I'm ignoring that. So here I have my route, and I'm just getting all the fields. So, or I'm actually just getting the name, the title and the description, because I'm actually hard coding in my requests to Trello the board that I want. But if I wanted to, I could also pull out the board ID. And then I'm using my Trello client to create a card using the name and description. And then I'm using the data that I got. Like, I made the card, but I need to tell Sentry, okay, here's how you link back to that card when I'm in Sentry. And there's 3 things that you'll need: is identifier, web URL, and project. So the identifier could be anything that you want. I'm using the card ID here so that I can actually make a request to Sentry later and get that piece of the like display name. And since I'm not using like a database or anything, the web URL is the actual like link to that card. And then the project is just a way to show, like, you know, I give you, I guess, a little bit more information of like what you actually linked. So here's this in full. I got my project separated by a pound sign, and then the identifier, which in this case is actually like the card ID itself. So that's pretty cool. We have this created, this link also, because we pre-populated it, it links back to Sentry, which is really cool. And I'm actually going to delete the first one because we made two. So we got our ticket, our card. Sorry, I keep saying ticket because I'm used to Jira. But what if I like resolve in Sentry? So I'm going to resolve here because I've decided this is resolved. We're done with it. We Gucci. If I go into Trello, it's still in my unresolved list, which is like, it's okay. Like I could manually move it over if I wanted to, but it might be nice to actually auto resolve that when Sentry does. So I'm going to look into how to do that. I'm going to just actually unresolve this for now. And I'm going to go back into our Sentry integration details page. And I'm actually going to scroll down and click this little button here, which basically is going to subscribe me. I'm going to now subscribe to issue like webhook events. So I don't know if you can see the text. It's pretty small here, but it says created, resolved, and assigned. So I will get notified, my service will get notified when an issue is created, resolved, or assigned. And so for this piece of the demo, I'm actually going to care about an issue being resolved. So I'm going to save this change here. I'm going to go back here, and when I resolve, we're going to see that, okay, cool. It moved into my resolved list. That's really cool because now those are in sync, at least one way. I'm not able to sync the other way because I'm not getting any webhooks from Trello, but you could potentially, make requests to Trello to see if something was resolved, and then, send a request to Sentry to do that. But I didn't implement that. So yeah, I guess now I want to look at the code for that to kind of give you an example of like how I did that. So webhook events from the integration platform have a couple of things. The first is this Sentry hook resource in the headers. This tells you like what the resource is. So in this case, it's issue because I subscribe to issues. And then in the actual body of the request, we have an action. And if you can see here, I'm checking if the resource is issue and the action is resolved, then I want to do my stuff because that's what I care about. And I'm getting the issue from the data. It's basically that comes in the request that you get. And here is where I'm making a request to Sentry to get the external issue. So what this means is we on Sentry store like an external issue, which has the data of, okay, there's an external issue linked to this Sentry issue. So keep a record of that. And because I get the issue ID in this request, I'm in this webhook, then I can use that ID to get the actual external issue, which I don't know if you can see this well, but this is the kind of that display name that I was talking about earlier. And because I saved the card ID in the display name, I'm just going to split that out and grab that ID. And then I'm going to use my Trello client, Trello client to actually do the resolving because now I have that card ID. So that's how I'm using that webhook. I think the last thing that I wanted to cover or that I implemented in the code is this has been great for, manually creating, issues or like creating a Trello issue from this side panel, but you may have a case where you want to create an issue based on something else happening and doing it automatically. So if we want to look into that, what I've done is I've actually made a rule that's already set up. But in order for the rule to work, I need to have this alert rule action toggled on. And what this does is it makes the service, this integration, now an option in your issue alerts and metric alerts. So we'll look at issue alerts first, but then I'll just show you that you could do the same for metric alerts. So once again, I'm going to save this. And then I'm going to go look at my alert rules that I have. So I've made, hopefully you can see this, it's not too small, but I've just made a really basic rule that says If an events tag matches plan and the value is enterprise, then I want to send a notification via my Future of Frontend demo service. So that's already saved, but I'll just save it again just in case. So what this should do is when an event comes in and this rule is triggered, it should send that payload to my service. My service will then handle actually creating the issue or creating the card in Trello. And so it should all be done automatically. So what I'm going to do for that is actually go to my app. Oh, goodbye. Go to my app, and I have an endpoint that's just to handle like creating a bug. We can scroll down to that. It just captures an exception and it adds this like plan enterprise tag to it so that I actually can trigger that alert rule that I set up. So hopefully, yes. So hopefully now I go back to Trello and I can see that this was created. What's cool is that I've actually also added a label enterprise on here because I knew that, you know, that's what my alert rule was, you know, specified to do. So I don't have a lovely description formatted here. You could, with the event data, you know, make it pretty and give some more context, but I just wanted to show that you can, it can be done. And we can click this link to go back to Sentry. And in Sentry, we can see that we have this linked as well, which will take us back to Trello. So going back to the code can show you a little bit about how that works. So this is, again, my main route, everything goes back to my webhook URL, which is just my ngrok. And this time the resource is event alert. And I'm actually not checking an action here only because there is only one action, but you probably should check the action anyway, just in case we add more. But anyway, I'm just using the title from the event. I'm getting the webhook or the web URL from the event and making this description, which is how I get the link. And then I just made a utils function that takes in the event and gets the value from the tag plan, which in this case will be enterprise, because that's what my rule does. And then I'm creating the card in Trello. The one last thing that I have to do in this case, though, is tell Sentry, okay, I want you to link this card with this issue. And I'm just passing in the event to get to do this. So that's like the one last thing. That's how I get this part to show up, since you know, I'm handling that case. So I guess those are like, you know, most of the features of the integration platform. I guess want to show that for alerts, I guess I should move this away. Sorry if you've all been staring at Schaefer's face. I could also create a metric alert, and instead, I guess of, you know, PagerDuty or Slack or whatever, if I wanted to, actually, I don't know if you can see this, but it says internal here. So like, I know that this is a service that's just going, it's internal to me. And you could save this rule. And the only difference would be that instead of having the resource be event alert, it would be, you would check for metric alert, and then the payload would be slightly different, but you could do a similar flow of, you know, receiving the payload, doing something with it, and, you know, getting alerted however you wanted and whatnot. So